What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and we've got our Week 4 recap from the SEC. And we're going through every conference. Hopefully have 2 or 3 of these recaps done today. And I'm going with a new format for this video. I'm just going to scroll across the screen the scores and some of the stats from these games, but I'm not going to necessarily talk about what's on the screen at that time. And this way, when I was doing these videos before, I would have a certain amount of time I would talk about each slide in the video, and I would try to rush to finish talking, or maybe I would just have to kill some time as that slide finished. But now I'm just going to be able to talk about these teams, take as much time as I want about each team, and you can just kind of check out the scores as they scroll across the screen. So we're going to start off with UMass at Tennessee. And this was a pretty rough performance by Tennessee. They did not look very good on the offensive side of the ball. I don't really know exactly what was going on with them. They did get 7 sacks on defense, so that was impressive. UMass, though, gave them all they could handle in this game. I was a little bit surprised. I thought it might be a somewhat close game, but not necessarily this close. John Kelly, again, over 100 yards. He has been very good for this team all season long. But looking at the stats, that's another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the stats much closer. Total yards in this game was pretty close. Tennessee 319, UMass 281. First downs 18-14 in favor of Tennessee. So if you look at that, this game is actually pretty even. It's not one of those games where the score was close, but if you look at the yards, one team dominated, similar to Auburn last week against Mercer. So yeah, Tennessee just the 1 turnover, UMass no turnovers. It just looked like these teams were pretty even, which is again is a surprise. I was very surprised this game was this close. I thought Tennessee would win at least by a couple of touchdowns, at least a comfortable win, but that did not happen. We'll have to see how Tennessee does moving forward. They have a tough challenge coming up this weekend against Georgia. All right, next game, Texas A&M against Arkansas. What a game this was. I kind of thought Texas A&M would win it. They really showed a lot in the second half of that last game. They seemed like they finally got going. Kellen Mond played pretty well in this one. So, yeah, I thought it was an excellent game. But if you watch this game, Texas A&M, I do not understand what they were doing at the end of regulation. They were pretty much playing for overtime. They didn't try to get a touchdown at all. They were not in a hurry. They just let the clock wind down. Ultimately, they did win in overtime, but I was thinking at the time, man, this may be a huge mistake because Arkansas couldn't stop them. If they had just kept their foot on the gas, I really believe they could have scored a touchdown and won that game. But anyways, they won the game, and that, if they had lost because of that, you may see Kevin Sumlin fired this morning because that would have been a big mistake. Christian Kirk was huge in this game. He had 110 receiving yards. Had the kickoff return for a touchdown. Kellen Mond had 109 rushing yards in this one, so he played very well. Keith Ford was also over 100 yards. For Arkansas, David Williams had 96 total yards. Chase Hayden 77 yards. Jonathan Nance led them in receiving with 100 yards, but it was a lot of offense in this game. Not too much defense being played. If you look at the total yards, Texas A&M won that battle 501 to 457. Passing was pretty close. You wouldn't expect Texas A&M to outrush Arkansas, what they did, 285 to 226. Turnovers were even. Each team had 1 turnover, so it was an even game. I think these two teams are pretty even. I think they're both, in the lower half of the SEC West, even after this game. I do think Texas A&M probably has a bigger upside with Kellen Mond, the freshman. I think there's a lot of potential there. So I do think Texas A&M, for the first time in a long time, could actually finish the season better than they started. They usually get off to all these great starts, and then down the stretch they fall apart. But maybe we get a different story this year out of the Aggies. Next game, Louisiana Tech and South Carolina. South Carolina wins this one 17-16. What a game. This was an excellent game. South Carolina, they got to get a kicking game. They came through and got that game-winning field goal, but there's some issues there with this team. They lose Deebo Samuel last week, and you could really tell they missed him on this offense. Jake Bentley did have a good game, 295 passing yards. South Carolina had 2 turnovers in this game. Bentley threw an interception. You look at the total yards. South Carolina did win this one 438 to 361. It was, a pretty close, what's that, about 80 yards difference. So it was pretty close for Louisiana Tech and South Carolina. Another game that was an even game, a fun game, an exciting game. And the question is, how good is South Carolina? Because we really don't know. We thought after they beat NC State, this team was going to be, one of the contenders in the East. Now it's not really looking that way after they lose to Kentucky. They almost lose this game. But still, they just have one loss, so long ways to go, and they can improve and maybe still contend for the East. We'll have to wait and see. And how about this next game? Alabama just completely decimates Vanderbilt, 59-0. And I thought this game was going to be much closer. I think I said it'd be about a 14-point game. I thought Vanderbilt's defense would play much better, but they just got absolutely destroyed. We haven't seen Alabama put this kind of performance on in a long time. And it was on the ground that they did it. Total yards this game, Alabama 677 to 78. Vanderbilt didn't even get 100 yards in this game. Alabama 496 rushing yards. That's probably the most rushing yards they've had in maybe ever. I don't know. I don't have the answer to that one, but they just dominated. They got a couple of turnovers. They jumped on them early, and this one just was not close. And what this game shows you is what we already knew, was Vanderbilt is a much better pass defense than they are against the run for whatever reason. We saw that against Kansas State. But maybe that run defense is a lot worse than we thought. And Alabama can still line up and run it right down your throat. And I think this is a case of Alabama just has way better athletes than Vanderbilt. They're bigger, they're faster, they're stronger. They have the 5-star recruits. Vanderbilt gets the 3-star recruits. And it just really showed here with Alabama wants to, when they are fired up, because there were some things said, from Vanderbilt and things said in the media about Alabama struggling, whatever. They can really run the football, so they didn't even need to throw it much. The question is, what is going to happen when they get against a team that shuts down that run and they have to throw the ball? So there is still a little bit of concern there for Alabama, because they're not going to be able to run for 496 yards against other teams in the SEC. So that's the big question. Vanderbilt, what do we know about them? Well, we know they're not a contender in the East. They're not that good, but maybe a middle of the pack top team there in the Eastern Division. First downs in this game, Alabama 38, Vanderbilt 3. 3 first downs. It was complete domination, and we'll see if this continues for Alabama, or was it just one time they just had a perfect game? That'll be the big question going forward. All right, Mississippi State and Georgia, the game that I said was the game of the week in the SEC, and it turned out to be a dud as Georgia just got going early and never looked back. So the question now is, how good is LSU? Because we see them get blown out by Mississippi State, and then Georgia blows out Mississippi State. It's definitely strange. I know home field has a lot to do with it, but still, 31-3. I was hoping for a good game here and did not get it. The defense for Georgia is for real. I don't know offensively if they're quite where they want to be with Jacob Eason out. I don't even know what they'll do when he's healthy. I don't even know if he'll come back in or not. But total yards in this game, Georgia 404, Mississippi State 280. So they did dominate that area of the game. Passing, Georgia 201 yards, Mississippi State 103. Only 103 passing yards. And that's the thing from Fitzgerald. We've seen him struggle a little bit, throwing the football. Mississippi State had 2 turnovers. Georgia just 1. The rushing game was pretty even. 203 for Georgia, 177 for Mississippi State. Georgia, forced them. What are you going to do when you have to throw it? Mississippi State couldn't do it. Fitzgerald was only 15 of 33 passing, so he just did not get it done. 3.1 yards per pass. In contrast, Georgia was 16.8 yards per pass. So they were, much more effective when they did throw the football. Only threw it 12 times. But when they needed to throw it, they came up big. Mississippi State just couldn't get the pass game going. And we'll see what happens with these teams going forward. Is Mississippi State done in the West? Is Georgia the clear favorite in the East? It sure looks that way. I don't really see anybody in the East that you would think is going to be able to challenge them. Syracuse and LSU. LSU wins this one 35-26. It was a lot closer than LSU wanted it to be. It seemed like they were going to put this away, but here comes Syracuse coming back. LSU in the end had that big touchdown with just a little bit of time left in the clock to put it away. But I thought this game would be fairly close. It was similar to how I thought it would play out. Syracuse is a pretty good team. They got a good offense, so I wasn't shocked by that. Dungy threw for 265 yards in this one. Let's see. Total yards in this one, LSU 414, Syracuse 384. So it was actually pretty even there. Both teams had one turnover. And, you know, it was impressive to see LSU throw the ball for 263 yards. We've really seen them struggle in that aspect and actually had more passing yards than rushing yards in this game. So a little bit of surprise there, and we'll see if they can continue that passing game moving forward. Let's see now. We're going to go to Florida and Kentucky. Oh, a heartbreaking loss for Kentucky. This turned out to be the game of the weekend in the SEC. Man, Kentucky had the chance here. Florida scores the go-ahead touchdown on a busted coverage by Kentucky. And then Kentucky gets the ball down across midfield. Thought they might have a shot at a field goal. It was a long one, but it came up just a bit short, and Florida survives. The streak continues. And this was a tough one for Kentucky, because if they got this win, you might say that they're the second best team in the East. Florida, even though they won this game, I'm still not all that impressed with them. Luke Del Rio coming in at quarterback. I thought from the beginning of the year, I thought he should be the starter. Before he got hurt last year, I thought this offense looked pretty good with him at quarterback. So we'll see what they do moving forward. Cleveland had 110 yards receiving for Florida. And let's see. Total yards in this one, Florida actually did win that battle, 395 to 340. Turnovers, Florida just had one, none for Kentucky. Didn't see many turnovers this weekend in the SEC. Passing yards were pretty even. Florida did a good job in getting 209 passing yards when they have struggled in that area at times. And yeah, this was just a gutsy win for Florida. This is kind of what they do. They just find ways to win games. And if they can continue along, it could be just like the last 2 years. If they can get that one win over Georgia, we could see Florida back in the SEC championship. I definitely think Georgia is the better team, but we see some crazy outcomes in that rivalry. All right, moving on now to Auburn at Missouri. Auburn puts up 51 points, wins at 51-14. Kerryon Johnson had 5 touchdowns in this game, even though he didn't really get a whole lot of yards. And Missouri we know is bad, but still, this is kind of what I've been saying about Auburn. I said that they would get this offense going. I thought they were fine, even though they had the turnovers last week. They outgained them 482 yards to 340, and they didn't play their starters maybe much, if at all, in the fourth quarter. So, you know, it could have been much worse if Auburn had kept their foot on the gas. They got really conservative in the second half, even before they took the starters out. Jarrett Stidham was good again, 16 of 21 passing, 219 yards. Actually, that's the team stat, so I don't know exactly what his number was. But he's been very accurate. He's been very efficient, and that's exactly what you need. The concern for me with Auburn is the running game. It just is not quite. It doesn't look like the normal Auburn running game. I know they ran for 263 yards, but Missouri is not very good on defense. And a lot of plays, they just aren't getting those 5 to 8 yard runs consistently. You know, with Auburn football, a lot of times you would see, instead of 3 yard gains, they were getting 5, 6 yard gains. Now they're busting out some big runs still, but the consistency, you know, of getting those 5, 6, 7 yard runs is just not there. The passing game, I think, is going to be better, and it is better than it was last year. And I still am very high on this Auburn team. I think they still have a chance in the West. They get Alabama at home, they get Georgia at home, and if Mississippi State, if they can beat them, and LSU is not what we think, they can handle them on the road, they could still be sitting there with just one loss heading into those final games against Georgia and Alabama. So I think Auburn's in great shape right now. They have to continue to get better on offense. That defense is very good. They're still, even after this game, in the top 5 of total defense in the country. So we'll see if it continues and to see if they continue to get better. But that's it. That's our final game. And let me know if you like this format for these videos better. Just me scrolling all this stuff across the screen and just talking, you know, as much as I want, and not having to worry about rushing or slowing down or all that like I normally do. Let me know what you think about that. This will be the only one we probably do this week this way. We may do a couple more. We'll see what all you guys say about this one. But that's going to do it for this recap. We'll have the rest of our recaps coming up. We'll have our power rankings for each conference. We will have our previews going into next weekend. We'll have the playoff eliminator. We'll have our college pick'em. We'll have, what else do we got? We'll have our upset alert. Had a lot of them last week. And we'll have our Heisman watch coming up later in the week. So all kinds of college football videos. Also going to be doing some new stuff, looking at stats, looking at all the stats in college football after week 4 of the season. So make sure you stay tuned for all those videos here on the SG1 Sports channel. And thanks for watching this video. And stay tuned for more here on the SG1 Sports YouTube channel.